When my stepmom threw my suitcases onto the driveway the night of my dad's funeral and screamed, "You're not family, pack your bags and get out." I didn't fight back. I didn't shed a single tear, nor did I mention the $28 million estate or the commercial skyscraper downtown sitting entirely in my name. I just picked up my bags, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "Okay, Victoria, enjoy the house while you still can." Everyone watching thought I was weak. My stepmom thought she had won everything, reducing my life to a forgotten memory. But what she didn't realize was that I wasn't just my father's daughter. I was the managing director of the very firm holding every single deed, debt, and asset to her entire life. Follow my story until the end to see how one silent departure turned into the ultimate lesson in humility. My name is Paige Irving. I'm 32 years old, and until the night my father died, I believed that even in grief, people held onto a shred of basic human decency. I was wrong. The funeral flowers were still damp with rain when my stepmother, Victoria, dropped the pleasant mask she'd worn for 5 years. Standing in the grand foyer of my childhood home, she didn't offer a hug or a word of comfort. Instead, she stood at the base of the winding staircase, her arms crossed tight over her black designer dress, eyes burning with a cold, triumphant fire. Without warning, she motioned to her son, Julian, who carried 2 of my suitcases down the stairs and tossed them onto the wet pavement outside. "You're not family, Paige," Victoria sneered, her voice echoing off the marble walls. "This house belongs to people who actually matter now. Pack the rest of your cheap things and get out before I call security." I stood there, looking at the place where my dad used to read me bedtime stories, where we'd shared decades of warm family dinners. I could have screamed. I could have reminded her that she had entered our lives with nothing. But I didn't shed a single tear. I didn't raise my voice. I simply picked up my bags, looked her straight in the eye, and quietly said, "Okay, Victoria, enjoy the house while you still can." She thought I was defeated. She had no idea. Victoria had entered my father's life 5 years ago, posing as the devoted, loving partner every grieving widower dreams of. But behind closed doors, she was a master manipulator. Slowly, systematically, she chipped away at my dad's relationships, isolating him from longtime friends and ensuring her spoiled, 30-year-old son, Julian, was given a cushy position in the family network. I saw through her from day one, which made me her primary target. The ink on my father's death certificate wasn't even dry before the celebration began. Less than an hour after throwing me into the rain, Victoria invited her inner circle over to the estate. As I loaded my luggage into the trunk of my modest rental car, I could hear expensive champagne corks popping inside. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Julian was already sitting in my father's favorite leather armchair, laughing uproariously as he poured scotch into a crystal glass. Victoria stood by the fireplace, raised her glass, and toasted to what she believed was her newly inherited empire. "To fresh starts," I heard her declare, her voice carrying across the manicured lawn. No more dead weight. She genuinely believed I was broken. In her mind, I was just a struggling, 32-year-old woman with a low-paying job, forced to spend the night in some seedbed motel, completely at her mercy. She thought she'd erase me forever. What Victoria failed to realize was that every celebration built on a lie eventually demands a bitter price. What Victoria and Julian never bothered to learn was that I hadn't spent the last decade idle. At 22, I moved to New York City, determined to build a life on my own terms without leaning on my father's fortune. Over 10 relentless years, I worked my way up from a low-level analyst to senior managing partner at Irving and Vance, one of the premier commercial real estate and asset management trusts on the East Coast. My father was extraordinarily proud of my independence, but more than that, he trusted my judgment completely. During his final year, as his health began to decline, he saw Victoria's true motives becoming clearer by the day. He noticed the subtle pushes for power of attorney, the sudden interest in his bank accounts, and the way Julian eyed his business holdings like a vulture waiting for a meal. Quietly, without causing domestic drama, my father reached out to me and my firm's elite legal team. Together, We systematically restructured his entire fortune. The family mansion, the fleet of luxury vehicles, the private accounts, and even the 40-story commercial skyscraper downtown were legally transferred into an irrevocable corporate trust. My father ensured that upon his passing, sole management authority over that trust would not go to his wife, nor to a probate court, but directly to me as chief executive of Irving and Vance. Victoria thought she was inheriting an empire, but in reality, she was living in a house owned by my firm, driving cars leased by my company, and celebrating inside a trap she didn't even know existed. 3 days after the funeral, Victoria summoned her high-priced personal lawyer, Arthur Vance, who, despite sharing a common name, had no relation to my firm, to the mansion to begin claiming her prize. She sat across from him in my father's study, wearing a sharp silk suit, fully expecting a quick stamp of approval to seize the estate, liquidate the commercial accounts, and hand over the family business to Julian. She instructed Mr. Vance to immediately file paperwork to list the mansion for sale and transfer the downtown commercial skyscraper under Julian's name. But as Vance reviewed the county property records and public tax filings, his smug composure dissolved into visible panic. "Victoria," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, "there's a massive problem. The mansion isn't in your husband's name. It hasn't been for 8 months." Victoria's confident smile faltered. "What are you talking about? His name is on the front gate. The property was transferred into a corporate holding trust," Vance explained, turning his laptop toward her. "And it gets worse. Over the past year, your husband executed a heavy restructuring loan against the residence, over $1.5 million in corporate liens tied directly to the estate's maintenance and private management accounts." Victoria gasped, clutching her pearls. "Then the estate pays for it." "The estate has no liquid capital," Vance countered grimly. "By signing the preliminary inheritance claims yesterday, you personally accepted responsibility for the property's operational liabilities. Unless the primary trust owner steps forward to absorb the debt, the creditors are legally entitled to freeze your personal bank accounts within 30 days. Victoria stared at the screen, her empire suddenly turning into a crushing mountain of financial ruin. Panicked and desperate to save herself, Victoria scheduled an emergency meeting at the corporate headquarters downtown. She believed the board of directors for the skyscraper would bow to her as the grieving widow and hand over the building's massive revenue streams to cover her mounting debts. Julian marched in right beside her, wearing a tailored suit, already acting like he owned the entire floor. As Victoria pushed open the double-glass doors of the executive suite, she expected a room full of pushover corporate suits ready to sign away the deed. Instead, a tense, icy silence greeted them. Sitting at the head of the long mahogany table, framed by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city skyline, was a figure in a sharp, tailored blazer. Victoria stopped dead in her tracks, her face draining of all color. "What are you doing here?" Victoria hissed, her voice cracking as Julian stared in absolute disbelief. "This is a private corporate meeting. Security, throw this girl out." Not a single board member moved. The chief legal counsel cleared his throat and gestured toward me. "Mrs. Irving, please sit down. You are speaking to Paige Irving, managing director of Irving and Vance and the sole trustee of your late husband's estate." I slowly leaned forward, resting my hands on the table, looking at the woman who had thrown my bags into the rain just days before. "Welcome to my office, Victoria," I said calmly, my voice echoing across the quiet room. "You told me to pack my bags, because I wasn't family. But what you failed to realize is that I don't need to be in your family tree, because legally, I am your landlord, your creditor, and the owner of every single square foot you stand on." Victoria's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Julian's arrogant posture instantly collapsed, his eyes wide with sheer panic as he looked between me and the corporate board. I opened the thick leather binder resting in front of me and slid a stack of legal notices across the polished table. "Over the past 48 hours, my legal team conducted a full audit," I announced, my voice steady and unyielding. We found your attempts to alter property documents, your unauthorized attempts to access my father's private accounts, and the hidden debts you accumulated in his name during his final days. Victoria grabbed the table to steady her trembling hands. Paige, please, we're family. Your father wouldn't want this. He loved me. My father saw right through you, I replied coldly, which is why he ensured every asset was shielded long before he passed. As of 8 o'clock this morning, the corporate trust has formally revoked your access to all estate funds. Furthermore, an official eviction notice has been served for the mansion. Victoria collapsed into the nearest chair, tears finally breaking through her heavy makeup. Not tears of grief, but of absolute defeat. You have 30 days to surrender all unauthorized claims and vacate the property, I continued, looking directly into her frantic eyes. If you attempt to contest the trust or hide behind false claims, my firm will immediately file criminal charges for estate fraud and elder financial abuse. The choice is entirely yours. The woman who had tried to erase me was now reduced to begging for mercy in front of the very board she tried to control. Victoria and Julian didn't fight back. They couldn't. Facing the reality of massive personal debt and potential criminal charges, they signed the full surrender of claims within 48 hours. 30 days later, they quietly vacated the mansion, moving into a modest two-bedroom apartment near the highway. Julian lost his cushy lifestyle and was forced to take an entry-level job, while Victoria spent her days dealing with the financial consequences of her own greed. I sold the family mansion to a quiet young family who would fill its halls with genuine love, transferring every cent of the proceeds into a new venture, the Irving Foundation for Financial Empowerment. Today, the foundation provides legal aid, resources, and mentorship to young women navigating financial abuse and building independent careers, just as I did. Sometimes, when I sit in my office high above the city, looking down at the streets below, I think about the night I was thrown into the rain. Victoria thought she was kicking out a helpless victim, but in reality, she was pushing me toward my rightful place. Silence is